What I'm about to tell you happened to someone I know very well. Someone who trusted the wrong people, lost everything, and then built something even better from the ashes. This is the story of Marcus Martinez, and why sometimes the worst betrayal leads to the greatest triumph. "We're restructuring the entire West Coast division," Rebecca said through the pixelated Zoom screen, her voice carrying that corporate tone that means your world is about to end. "Your position has been eliminated, effective immediately. My name is Marcus Martinez. I'm 36 years old, and until that moment, I was the Chief Technology Officer at Digital Nexus Solutions in San Francisco. For 8 years, I had poured my soul into that company, building the infrastructure that transformed us from a struggling tech startup into a major player in cloud computing solutions. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I simply asked about my final paycheck and ended the call, professional to the bitter end. That was 6 weeks ago. Today, I'm sitting in my apartment overlooking the Bay Area, reviewing the non-disclosure agreement I signed when I started at Digital Nexus. What I found buried in the fine print would change everything. My phone buzzed. Another message from Alex, our former lead developer. "They're dismantling everything we built. The new CTO doesn't understand our architecture. You still thinking about that project we discussed?" I set the phone down. Not yet. Timing was everything. Let me back up and tell you how I got here, because this story starts long before that Zoom call ended my career. Digital Nexus was founded by Robert Chen, a visionary who understood that small businesses needed enterprise-level cloud solutions they could actually afford. When I joined 8 years ago, we were 15 people working out of a cramped office in Soma, surviving on ramen noodles and pure determination. Robert had the vision, but he needed someone who could turn that vision into reality. That someone was me. I built our first scalable platform from scratch, working 100-hour weeks while my relationship with Sarah slowly fell apart. "You care more about that company than you do about us," she said during our final fight. She wasn't wrong, but I believed in what we were building. For years, I turned down offers from Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. Robert made me feel like family. "This is your baby too, Marcus," he'd always say. We didn't have formal equity agreements, a mistake I now realize. But there was always this understanding that loyalty would be rewarded when we made it big. Then everything changed when Robert had his heart attack 2 years ago. His nephew Trevor took over operations. Trevor had an MBA from Stanford and talked a good game about scaling for maximum efficiency. But he didn't understand the technology that made our company special. He was more interested in making Digital Nexus attractive for acquisition than in building something that would last. The culture shifted overnight. Innovation became secondary to metrics. When I raised concerns in board meetings, Trevor would smile and say, "Let's table that for now, Marcus. We'll circle back." We never did. 6 months ago, I overheard Trevor in his office with 2 executives from Quantum Corp, a massive cloud computing giant. They were discussing which departments would be redundant after a potential acquisition. My name was at the top of their list. That night, I started sketching what would eventually become NexGen Cloud, a company built on everything Digital Nexus was abandoning. I kept my plans secret, continued delivering exceptional work, and waited. If they decided to keep me, I'd stay loyal. If not, I had an exit strategy. The warning signs started subtle. First, Trevor stopped including me in strategic planning meetings. Then I was removed from client calls. Finally, Sarah from HR, different Sarah, not my ex, scheduled a quick chat about my team structure. Still, I documented everything, trained junior developers, and made myself indispensable. Or so I thought. 3 days before my termination, Rebecca requested access to all my project files and development roadmaps. I handed over everything without hesitation, maintaining my professionalism, even as I sensed what was coming. When that Zoom call finally came, it lasted exactly 9 minutes. While Rebecca explained my severance package, I was already texting Alex. Time to discuss that project. My place tomorrow, 8 p.m. 6 developers showed up. They all had the same story. Marginalized by new management, innovations shelved, concerns dismissed. They were waiting for someone to build something better. The moment that crystallized everything was watching Trevor's first company-wide presentation after the Quantum acquisition was announced. Standing on the same stage where we'd once celebrated our technical breakthroughs, he unveiled Quantum's integration roadmap. Digital Nexus's custom solutions will be phased out over 12 months, he announced, as we transition to Quantum's proven enterprise architecture. The architecture he was referring to was outdated by at least 5 years. Our team had developed solutions specifically because Quantum's approach couldn't handle the complexity that modern clients demanded. Now they were scrapping our innovations to force-fit their legacy framework. I watched the remaining engineers exchange worried glances. They knew what this meant. Years of work erased, client needs ignored. The very innovations that made Digital Nexus valuable enough to acquire would be dismantled by people who didn't understand their value. I didn't speak during the Q&A. I just observed who nodded along with Trevor's corporate speak and who stared at their laptops, avoiding eye contact. That told me everything I needed to know about who I could trust. After the meeting, I sat in my car in the parking garage for almost an hour, engine off, thinking. This wasn't just about losing my job. This was about watching something I'd helped create being deliberately destroyed by people who saw it only as a commodity. That evening, I finalized the business plan I'd been developing. What started as a contingency was becoming reality. I created an encrypted group chat with the 6 engineers who'd come to my apartment. If you're serious about building something better, I have a proposal. Complete discretion required. All 6 responded within minutes. For the next month, we met secretly at my place every evening. We identified the flaws in Quantum's approach, the opportunities they were missing, and the clients most likely to be frustrated by the forced migration. We mapped out exactly what made our Digital Nexus systems superior and how we could evolve them further without violating any intellectual property laws. I used my severance package to secure office space and filed the paperwork to establish NexGen Cloud. The name was deliberate, representing the next generation of what Digital Nexus should have become. The day I received my final paycheck from Quantum, Trevor sent me a message. "Heard you might be starting something new. We should talk before you make any hasty decisions." I didn't respond. The time for conversations had passed weeks ago when Rebecca decided my 8 years of contributions were no longer aligned with their corporate structure. Instead, I sent a different message to my team. Office space secured. Legal documents ready. Timeline moved up. Ready to submit your resignations tomorrow? 6 variations of absolutely came back within minutes. I closed my laptop and looked at the framed photo on my desk. The original Digital Nexus team from 8 years ago, Robert's arm around my shoulder. Both of us grinning at our first successful client demo. "This one's for you, Robert," I whispered. "We'll build it right this time." 4 months after launching NexGen Cloud, we secured our first major client, Pinnacle Manufacturing, a mid-sized company that had been using Digital Nexus systems for 3 years. Their IT director, Jennifer, had worked closely with me on customizations for their specific workflow requirements. Quantum's integration team doesn't understand our needs, Jennifer explained during our pitch meeting. They keep trying to shove us into their standard template. We demonstrated our new platform, built on Digital Nexus's core principles, but with significant improvements. Jennifer signed the contract that same afternoon. 2 days later, I received a cease and desist letter from Quantum's legal department, claiming breach of non-compete and theft of proprietary information. They demanded immediate shutdown and threatened litigation. I'd been expecting this. Our attorney, Michael Rodriguez, reviewed the letter and confirmed what I already suspected. Their non-compete is poorly written, it's too broad to be enforceable, and they have no evidence of proprietary theft because there isn't any. Still, fighting a Fortune 500 company would drain our resources. I decided to handle this directly and requested a meeting with Rebecca. She agreed, probably thinking I'd be intimidated. We met at Quantum's gleaming downtown office, where the Digital Nexus logo had been relegated to a tiny corner of the lobby directory. "You know this can't continue," Rebecca said as soon as we sat down. "Your company directly competes with technology you developed while employed here." "The technology I developed while employed here is being phased out according to your own roadmap," I replied calmly. "And my non-compete specifically prohibits using Digital Nexus proprietary systems, which we're not doing. NexGen's architecture was built from scratch." Rebecca's expression hardened. "Regardless, you've violated the spirit of the agreement, and you've poached our employees." Former employees who left voluntarily after the acquisition changed their roles and responsibilities. She leaned forward. "Marcus, let's be realistic. Quantum has unlimited resources for litigation. You have what? 4 months of operating capital? Why put yourself through this? We could bring you back as a senior consultant. 2-year contract, excellent compensation." There it was, the trap. They didn't want to rehire me. They wanted to bind me legally while they eliminated any competitive threat. "I appreciate the offer," I said, standing up, "but I'll take my chances with NexGen." That afternoon, Quantum escalated. They contacted Pinnacle Manufacturing and 3 other prospects, warning them about potential legal issues with NexGen's technology. Jennifer called me immediately. "They're threatening to audit our existing systems and void our support agreements if we work with you," she said, frustration clear in her voice. "We can't risk that kind of disruption." Within 48 hours, we lost all 4 prospects. Our runway suddenly shortened from months to weeks. The team gathered in our small office that evening, tension thick in the air. They looked to me for direction. "They're playing hardball," I acknowledged. "But they've made a strategic error." I pulled up an email I'd received that morning from Robert Chen, Digital Nexus's original founder. He'd been quietly watching the acquisition unfold from his recovery. "Marcus, I've been following what's happening. Quantum didn't just acquire Digital Nexus's technology, they inherited its problems too. Call me. I think we can help each other." I looked at my team. Quantum is so focused on crushing us that they're neglecting their integration. We know the weaknesses in Digital Nexus's architecture better than anyone. Robert says they're already experiencing major system failures with key clients. Alex nodded slowly, understanding dawning. "And those clients will need solutions fast. Solutions Quantum can't deliver." "Exactly," I said. "They're trying to bury us in legal threats while their technical foundation crumbles. We don't need to fight them directly. We just need to be ready when their clients start looking for alternatives." The meeting with Robert changed everything. We met at his house in Marin County, away from corporate surveillance. At 64, he moved more slowly than when we worked together, but his mind remained razor-sharp. They didn't just buy Digital Nexus for the technology, Robert explained, spreading documents across his kitchen table. They bought it for the client contracts, specifically the Pacific Energy Group account. Pacific Energy was our largest client, a regional utility serving Northern California. Their contract alone represented 40% of Digital Nexus's annual revenue. What Quantum doesn't understand, Robert continued, is that Pacific Energy's infrastructure requirements are completely unique. Their grid management system required extensive customization. You led that project, Marcus. I nodded. 3.5 years of development. Nearly burned out my entire team getting it right. Robert slid a confidential memo across the table. Internal quantum communications forwarded by a board member who remained loyal to him. They were promising Pacific Energy seamless integration, while planning to force them onto standard quantum architecture. The timeline was impossible. The memo outlined a 4-month migration schedule for a system that had taken us 3.5 years to build. Worse, it dismissed specific requirements as unnecessary customizations that would be standardized for efficiency. Pacific Energy's CEO doesn't know yet, Robert said quietly. But when they begin implementation and the limitations become clear, Pacific Energy will face service disruptions, I finished. Possibly regulatory violations if they can't maintain required reporting standards. Exactly. And here's what Quantum doesn't realize. The contract I negotiated with Pacific Energy includes performance guarantees, significant financial penalties for systems that don't maintain 99.9% uptime. This was the piece I hadn't known. Quantum hadn't just acquired our company. They'd inherited obligations they couldn't fulfill. But there was something else in Robert's expression, a personal edge to his involvement. Why are you helping us? I asked directly. Quantum paid you well for the acquisition. Robert's expression darkened. They did. Then they used clauses in the purchase agreement to reduce the final payment based on integration costs. Trevor didn't understand what he was signing. The deal that made headlines? We received about 50% of that figure. There it was. Quantum had manipulated the acquisition to pay less than promised, using complex financial mechanisms that Trevor hadn't caught. They hadn't just discarded the Digital Nexus team. They'd cheated the founder, too. Does Trevor know you're talking to me? I asked. Robert shook his head. Trevor took a position with Quantum's corporate development team. He thinks he's being groomed for executive leadership. His voice carried deep disappointment. He'll learn eventually. As I drove back to San Francisco, a new understanding crystallized. This wasn't just about my termination or Quantum's poor business decisions. This was about systematic corporate predation, identifying smaller companies with valuable client relationships, acquiring them under false pretenses, extracting what they wanted, and discarding the rest. I pulled into my apartment complex and sat in silence, processing the implications. Then I called Alex. Contact the team. Meeting tomorrow, 7 a.m. We need to accelerate development of our Pacific Energy compatible system. And I need you to pull every piece of documentation we have on their grid architecture. Are we going after Pacific Energy? Alex asked, excitement and apprehension mixing in his voice. Not yet, I replied. But we're going to be ready when they start looking for help. And they will. Sooner than Quantum expects. We had 6 weeks to prepare for Pacific Energy's inevitable crisis. The team worked around the clock, developing a platform that could seamlessly interface with Pacific Energy's existing infrastructure, while providing the improvements they would desperately need. I maintained careful distance from Pacific Energy executives, knowing Quantum was likely monitoring any contact. Instead, I focused on building our capacity and documenting Quantum's integration failures. Meanwhile, Robert activated his industry network. Without directly referencing our strategy, he began raising questions at energy conferences about the technical challenges of forced system migrations. The first major crack appeared 4 weeks into our preparation. Quantum initiated the first phase of Pacific Energy's migration and immediately encountered the issues we'd anticipated. 2 substations experienced monitoring failures, creating gaps in regulatory compliance data. Pacific Energy's CTO, David Park, publicly described the issues as expected transition challenges, but privately, according to Robert's contacts, he was furious. 2 weeks later, when the second phase caused a 6-hour reporting blackout across an entire service region, the situation exploded. Pacific Energy issued a formal notice of deficiency to Quantum, triggering the performance guarantee clauses. Quantum's response was predictable. They blamed inherited architectural limitations from Digital Nexus, setting up a narrative to void the performance guarantees by claiming the original system was defective. That was our opening. I drafted a detailed technical analysis demonstrating how the failures stemmed not from Digital Nexus's architecture, but from Quantum's incompatible integration approach. Robert delivered this document personally to David Park. 3 days later, I received a text from an unknown number. "Coffee tomorrow, 3 p.m., Blue Bottle on mission. DP." When I arrived at the cafe, David was already seated in a corner booth. He cut straight to the point. "Your analysis matches our internal findings," he said quietly. "Quantum is trying to force us into their system to avoid maintaining our customizations. The regulatory risks are unacceptable." "You have options," I replied carefully. "Do I?" "Our contract with Quantum is binding. Breaking it would trigger penalties exceeding our annual IT budget." "Unless Quantum is in material breach through performance failures," I suggested, "which your legal team is probably exploring right now." David's slight smile confirmed my assumption. "We'd still need an immediate alternative. Regulatory reporting can't wait for a new vendor selection process." I slid a USB drive across the table. "This contains a technical overview of NexGen's platform. It was built specifically to address the issues you're experiencing. We can deploy within 2 weeks with 0 regulatory interruption." He pocketed the drive without examining it. "Quantum claims you violated non-compete agreements." "They've made that claim, but their legal position has significant weaknesses, which our counsel has documented." I provided a second USB drive. "This contains our attorney's analysis. Your legal team will find it illuminating." David nodded once. "I'll be in touch." 2 days later, Quantum announced an emergency stabilization of Pacific Energy's systems, effectively admitting their integration had failed. Their stock dropped 15% by market close. That evening, I received an official RFP from Pacific Energy, bypassing their normal procurement process under emergency provisions. I gathered our team. "This is it. Pacific Energy needs a solution immediately, and we've built exactly what they require. Everything we've worked toward comes down to this proposal." Alex looked around at our small but determined team. "Should we be worried about Quantum's response when they realize what's happening?" I shook my head. "They created this crisis. Now they'll have to watch us solve it." The Pacific Energy Board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. on a Friday. By 2:30, my phone rang. "Unanimous approval," David said without preamble. "Expedited contract execution. We need implementation to begin Monday." Within an hour, our attorney confirmed the contract was clean. No hidden clauses or traps. Pacific Energy had agreed to our full implementation fee plus a 4-year maintenance agreement. The numbers would secure NexGen's future indefinitely. More importantly, the contract included specific indemnification against Quantum's legal claims. Pacific Energy's attorneys had reviewed our position and confirmed what we knew. Quantum's non-compete claims couldn't withstand serious scrutiny. The news hit the tech industry by late afternoon. Quantum's stock dropped another 18%. Their legal team immediately filed for an emergency injunction to block our contract. The hearing was scheduled for Monday morning, the same day our implementation was set to begin. When we arrived at the courthouse, Quantum had 6 attorneys present, led by their general counsel. Rebecca sat behind them, her expression tight with controlled rage. The judge reviewed the filings efficiently, then looked directly at Quantum's team. Your non-compete agreements appear to prohibit using proprietary digital nexus systems, but evidence suggests NexGen developed independent architecture. Furthermore, Pacific Energy's filing demonstrates urgent public interest in maintaining utility service reliability. She denied the injunction without further deliberation. As we exited the courthouse, Rebecca intercepted me in the hallway. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "Quantum doesn't lose." I met her gaze steadily. This was never about winning or losing. It was about building something that actually works. I walked past her to where my team waited. Together, we left to begin the implementation that would secure both Pacific Energy's systems and NexGen's future. The quiet victory felt complete. 24 months after the Pacific Energy contract, NexGen Cloud employed 45 people across 2 floors of a building in Soma, with views of the Bay Bridge that had witnessed both my professional destruction and resurrection. The Pacific Energy implementation had been flawless, completed ahead of schedule with 0 service interruptions. Word spread through the industry like wildfire. 8 major clients migrated to our platform within 18 months. Quantum eventually abandoned their legal pursuit, focusing instead on containing the damage to their cloud division. Rebecca was transferred to a subsidiary in another country. Trevor left for a venture capital firm, wiser for the experience. Robert occasionally visited our offices, pride evident as he watched a vision reborn stronger than before. He never officially joined NexGen, but his guidance remained invaluable. On the 3rd anniversary of my termination, I received an unexpected email from Rebecca. "You built something better than we ever could have. Some of us saw the writing on the wall but couldn't prevent the acquisition. Some victories take time." I closed my laptop and walked to the conference room where our team was celebrating the launch of our newest AI-powered module. These weren't just colleagues anymore. They were partners who had taken the same leap of faith I had, believing that competence and integrity would eventually triumph over corporate politics. Later that evening, I stood on my apartment balcony, watching the sunset paint the San Francisco skyline. The bitter taste of betrayal had faded, replaced by something unexpected: gratitude. Without Quantum's arrogance, without Rebecca's dismissal, NexGen might never have existed. I hadn't just reclaimed my career. I'd built something more aligned with my values than Digital Nexus could have become under Quantum's direction. Sometimes getting pushed out of the wrong place is exactly what you need to find the right one. And that's Marcus Martinez's story. A reminder that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing that ever happened to you, but only if you're willing to bet on yourself when everyone else has given up on you. What would you have done in Marcus's position? Let me know in the comments below.